Hello and welcome to the second video discussing the novel Frankenstein. Before we discuss the plot of the novel, I'd like to draw your attention to a couple of points. First, how the novel Frankenstein was conceived. I find this point extremely interesting as a series of stranger-than-fiction events have come together to contribute to Mary Shelley writing Frankenstein. As we mentioned in previous slide, the couple, Mary and Percy Shelley, were kind of ostracized from their families and their society because their behavior at the time would have been considered extremely scandalous. So as I mentioned that the couple got married in 1816, yet the society did not forgive them for all the scandals they were involved in earlier. So they decided to go live in Italy. Before reaching Italy, they received an invitation from Lord Byron to go visit him in his villa, Villa Diutadi, near Geneva, where he was spending time with his friend and doctor John William Polidori. One thing worth mentioning here is the year of their visit was called the Year Without Summer in Europe. What happened was a volcano, Mount Tambora, had erupted in Indonesia a year earlier. So around the same time they were in Europe, the volcanic dust had reached Europe and caused the temperature there to drop tremendously. Mary and Percy Shelley, along with Claire and Lord Byron and the doctor Polidori, were stuck in the villa and could not go out and swim in the lake or take hikes in the forest. So to pass the time, Lord Byron, as a challenge, suggested that each one of them writes a ghost story to share. Within a few weeks, we had 3 famous bodies of work. Byron penned his poem Darkness. Polidori wrote his short story The Vampire, on which the character Dracula was later invented. And Mary Shelley wrote her novel Frankenstein. Now, as we asked earlier, what really inspired Mary to write a novel in its known form? Well, there might have been more than one reason why she wrote the novel the way she did. First, she mentions that she had a dream after her first daughter passed away, that she carries her dead daughter and rubs her still body in front of a fireplace until her daughter comes back to life. Also, on the same night that Byron had challenged the group, Mary had a nightmare as she saw a creature lying down and someone trying to galvanize him or bring him back to life using electricity. And finally, and because we know that Mary had read her mother's biography written by her dad, she knows that she used to have a relationship with the artist Fusilli, who had drawn the famous Nightmare painting. And as we see in the painting, there is a woman lying on a bed, and sitting on top of her is this devilish creature. Another point I'd like to make before we go into the plot, and this is the fact that for most people, when we hear the name Frankenstein, this is what we think of. We think of the creature. But in reality, Frankenstein is actually the name of the doctor or the scientist who had created the creature. And one final point about the point of view of the narration. In this novel, we have frame narrative, and that is we have one narrator followed by a second one, followed by a third one. So we have 3 stories inside each other. The first narrator is the Captain Robert Walton, who's writing letters to his sister, telling her about his trip towards the North Pole. Then we have Victor Frankenstein himself telling us about his youth until he created the creature and all the trouble that he suffered from afterwards. And finally, we have the creature himself tell us the story of how he suffered being alone and abandoned. Now, let's go through a quick summary of the plot. We start in Walton's ship. Robert Wharton, as we said, is writing a series of letters to his sister to tell her about how his polar expedition is going. One day, he sees a gigantic figure in the distance, and he doesn't understand what that is. Next day, he takes on board a mysterious stranger, Victor Frankenstein. Now, here, Victor takes over the narration and tells Walton a complete tale about his life history and how he comes to be alone so near the North Pole. As a child, Victor Frankenstein's life in Switzerland is safe and secure, with loving parents and two younger brothers, Ernest and William. Victor's charitable mother also gives a home to a young orphan girl called Elizabeth, and Victor grows particularly fond of her. Victor shows an inquisitive nature and is particularly fascinated by anything scientific. Victor's mother falls ill and passes away. It's her dying wish that Victor and Elizabeth will one day get married. Victor leaves home and attends a university in Germany, where he becomes fascinated by the creation of life. For the next 2 years, he pursues his ambition to create a man and bring him to life. During this time, he neglects the family and friends and makes himself ill. Victor hopes to create a perfect being, but in reality, the huge creature he produces made up from pieces of various corpses he had taken from graveyards. Eventually, Victor succeeds in bringing his creation to life, but when he realizes how monstrous it actually looks, he abandons it. Victor is by now very unwell, but is nursed back to health by his close friend Henry. Together they go traveling to Italy. Before arriving, he receives the news that William Frankenstein, his younger brother, has been tragically killed. The blame has fallen on a trusted servant of the Frankenstein family, but Victor sees his creature near the scene of the crime, lit up by lightning flashes. So he realizes the truth about William's death. But he also knows that nobody will ever believe his fantastic story. The innocent Justine is tried and executed, so she and William become the first to fall victim to Victor's ambition. A guilty Victor goes alone into the Alps, where he meets up with the monster. He's surprised to find that not only has the creature survived, but also that he has the power of language. Here, the monster becomes our narrator and tells Victor a long story about how he has secretly lived in an outbuilding next to the Lacey family, following their lessons as they teach a foreign visitor their language, and also learning about other subjects such as history, geography, religion, and culture. He repays the family by secretly doing many of their household chores, like cutting wood for them. When he reveals himself to the family, they are so horrified by his appearance that the monster goes on the run again. The family flees, and the creature burns their home. He finds similar treatment from everyone that he meets and becomes lonely and isolated. The monster asks Victor to accept that he is responsible for his loneliness and misery, and to make him a female companion to be his partner throughout life. Victor agrees in a desperate attempt to save the rest of his family from the monster's revenge. Without telling him why, Victor journeys to Britain with Henry as his companion. The two separate, because Victor didn't want to tell him about his plans, and Victor goes to the remote Orkney Island to carry out his promise of creating a companion for the monster. Although he begins the work, he suddenly realizes the consequences of his actions. if the monster and his companion do get married, they're gonna create a whole generation of monsters in the world. And if she likes Victor instead of actually taking a like to the monster, then this also will be disastrous. So he destroys the companion before she comes to life. The monster, who has been following Victor all along, is furious. He promises that on the night Victor marries Elizabeth, he will return. Out of fury and revenge, the monster kills Henry. A distraught Victor returns to Switzerland and to Elizabeth. They are married and set out for their honeymoon. Remembering the monster's threat, Victor assumes that this is the night the monster will kill him, but instead, the monster murders Elizabeth. When Victor's father hears what had happened, he dies broken-hearted. Victor has a mental breakdown. When he recovers, he tells a magistrate what has happened, but no one believes him and no action is taken. Victor accepts that he must deal with the problem himself and sets out in pursuit of the monster. He chases it right across Europe and eventually finds himself in the Arctic, where Walton discovered him on the ice. Walton once again continues the narration in the letters to his sister. He tells her how Victor eventually dies from a combination of exhaustion and exposure to the cold, and how he finds the monster in Victor's cabin full of sorrow for the death and destruction he has caused. Telling Walton of the misery he has suffered, the monster leaps back onto the ice and disappears into the Arctic night, apparently intent on killing himself. So the novel ends there without us knowing if the monster actually did kill himself or if he's still living among us. This concludes the second video. I hope to see you soon in the third and last one. Take care.